we have to dispense of this piece of news because it's a piece of news, right? RFK Jr. Leaving the race, endorsing Donald Trump, bear cubs, brainworms, all of it. Okay, what do you make of it? Because he was an unserious man, too, sadly, because he got a great family legacy, and he could have been a serious guy, but he chose to be an unserious guy. He was never going to be president. He still carried on about how the fact that he might actually still be president of the United States. It's a lot of BS. But what do you make of this whole development?
Well, Donald Trump objects to being called weird. So what does he do? He picks J.D. Vance, who seems to have been made at a replicant factory on Friday afternoon when they were trying to get off of work. And then he picks, he goes and takes this endorsement from, one of the sadder figures in American public life, a guy who clearly is just broken. But, the first time, think about it, you have two candidates that are supporting Putin, two candidates who would like to end the war in Ukraine so that Russia could take Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And you have two candidates who are against any mandatory vaccines in schools. So that's the pro-polio group. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is just as nutty as it can be, and it will continue to dismay me that other members of my former party don't call it out. It's just crazy.
Well, there was this, the campaign and his running mate said this thing about how they were going to draw votes from everybody, but what they realized is that they weren't going to draw any votes from Biden at the time, and now Kamala. Of course not. They're conspiracy theorists. It's a very narrow band. The Democratic Party came out and put a statement out saying it's not going to get Donald Trump more votes, and I kind of agree with that. He's got that locked up. Like, you don't need the guy, the conspiracy theorist, to get you more votes if you're Donald Trump. You've actually got that constituency locked up well.
Yeah, and the dirty little secrets of endorsements is that they rarely, if ever, matter. Nobody really cares. And I say that as someone who spent, a good part of my life trying to get people to endorse a candidate I was working for, but it never really matters. It doesn't change a race, and this won't change the race. What's fascinating about the Trump campaign is it's rare that you see a campaign, basically it's having like a nervous breakdown in public. It has no idea what to do, and it's flailing around. And I don't know how they get out of this, because they don't really have a compelling message that Donald Trump could articulate. I don't think this race is going to be on a left-right axis. No. I think it's fine to talk about the economy. I think the Harris campaign is doing all the right stuff. But at the end of the day, like 2022, this isn't going to be about inflation or gas prices. This is going to be about Donald Trump. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Here's a question. I kind of agree with you about endorsements. I'm always fascinated. A newspaper that's always endorsed a Democrat comes out and endorses a Democrat. A newspaper that's always endorsed a Republican. And once in a while that breaks. But I agree with you. I'm not going to make my decision based on a newspaper. Do the Republicans who come out and speak and endorse Kamala Harris, does it create a permission structure amongst rank and file Republicans to say, I'm a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I don't share a ton of views with Democrats, but there's a permission structure now for me to say, I'm voting for Harris now because of some dangers of Donald Trump. Does that do anything, do you think, or you still think it doesn't mean much?
I think having someone up there saying it out loud is important. And look, I can't tell you how much I admire Jeff Duncan and Adam Kinzinger. These are people that had a lot to lose in politics, rising stars in the party, and they chose to do what the rest of the party should have done, but very few did, which is actually stick by what they said that they believed in. It's tremendously courageous to do this, and it's so rare in politics. So, yeah, I think it helps. I mean, look, at the Lincoln Project, we focus on these voters. Yeah. The soft Republican voters, the soft Dems. These were the last to join Trump in 2016, and usually the last to join are the first to leave in politics. I think that gap is widened a good bit since Dobbs. And just the sort of anger and ugliness that comes from what used to be a conservative movement, the way they attacked Governor Walz's son. This is just crazy. Horrible human beings expressing themselves in public. and it's repugnant to the
Yeah,
majority
and
of
in
people.
fairness to all conservatives, that was BS on every level. That's not a conservative thing to attack people's children who are not involved in politics, or people's children who are neurodivergent. I just don't want to. I don't want to paint Republicans with that brush, because I think a lot of people with common sense thought that was BS.
How many Republicans publicly called him out for doing it?
Yeah, very few.
Very few.
Very few.
And that's what's so disappointing.